schools to kind of go through these, and what I'll do is if I'm I know, it's everyone's talking, like, get our teacher voice on. Okay. So the next step is to kind of review what each group came up with and to look for similarities that we can kind of group. I think we'll see some common themes across the board, and then we might not. And then to create then kind of a general list that hopefully touches on and includes everything on. So if you're still working on yours, that's fine. But I'm going to go through each one, and if I'm not sure, I'll ask somebody from that group to kind of expand on it. And then try and you guys will help me try and see if you see similarities, what you might call them. So it's not just me pointing out all the similarities. But so we start here. Reading required in kindergarten, Y plus homework. Trickle down to standardized assessments, pressure even down into preschool. Misinformation and mixed messages to parents. And damaging to social emotional development of children who end up feeling like failures or disengaged. So that's great. I see a few different things here. Let's move on to the next one and then see if we can kind of keep grouping them that way. So number one, definition for the field. Interesting. How do you define an early educator? What is school? That's a very interesting one as in this group, right?
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you were thinking here on that one?
I recently read Washington and Smith's, Goffin and Smith, I think. Ready or Not, it's a book about leadership in early childhood education. And their point was that, we have all of these dichotomies in our field, whether it's, daycare versus early childhood education or babysitter versus teacher, and we really lack an identity that has been clearly defined by educators. We have all these public policy makers coming in and all of a sudden pushing these definitions on us that don't necessarily benefit us.
Okay, so great. That sounds like a really interesting point, right?
Yeah, exactly that, yeah.
Okay. Standards, trickle down, push down. We see that a little bit over here too. School and schedules, in and out of school, too regimented, all the requirements, I guess, for like where students need to be. Too much technology without adult interaction and without critical thinking skills. Content and curriculum often do not encourage discovery and thought and questioning and more. Okay. Education of politicians on development and appropriate practices. Paid as a professional, compensation and the requirements for the teaching, so kind of like the workforce issues for early childhood teachers. Change, unrealistic standard-driven practices and testing that is harming students. Equity and accessible in higher education as well as high-quality care in education. Is this for like the training of teachers in higher ed and early childhood? Okay, so teacher prep in early childhood as well as what we offer in the early childhood field. Okay. Play at the foundation. Great. Use of media with technology. Use of media / technology with children and families with ECE professionals and pre-service teachers. Child-directed time, free play, use of imagination, sustaining attention. Is there effort? Oh, executive function. Got you. Attachment relationships. Lack of parent and teacher advocates. Taking preschoolers into school from childcare, lowering the age. Can someone tell me a little bit about it?
Folks from Canada were saying that. Also, they were talking about the pre-K program in San Antonio.
Okay, so lowering the age across the board, or that it's too low, or that it's
taking like 4-year-olds and putting the, lowering the age of people going into the system.
Gotcha. Okay. Readiness. That said readiness culture and the idea children are not ready. Unrealistic expectations for kids too much too soon. High quality pre-K pushing Common Core standards and standardization in ECE. And higher ed miseducation of teachers. Oh, I'm in higher ed and I like that one. I like that one a lot. You're definitely miseducating teachers. All right, so let's see if together we can pick out some kind of common themes around here, because I see a lot of them, and I don't want to speak for everyone who wrote these, but how about I start with somebody else telling me what are some common themes that you see in these?
Academic push down.
All right, so we see that, right? We see that throughout a couple ones. So yeah, I'm trying to think if that's a part. What do you guys think? Academic push down, meaning like this is like, would you call this like the curriculum issues here, right? Do we think testing is separate, or do we want want to link testing to this? Okay. Anything else that you see related? So let's see what we have for academic push down. This reading required? This would count, right? Damaging social emotional, let's see, what else we have? Standards trickle down, we have one there. Curriculum, so that might be a little bit different about the type of the curriculum, more that it's being pushed down. Changing unrealistic standards that are driven practices, but they're more on testing. What else did I see? Another one. Would readiness fall under that?
Yeah.
Okay, what's another theme that people saw? Testing. All right.
I'd like to add to that readiness. If readiness for something that's coming in the future, the values of the current situation right now.
So the whole idea that if you're preparing for something down the road, you're not really doing anything in the moment for what you're focusing on now for readiness. Okay. And so I think with the testing we saw kind of like the pressure, right? The pressure. Anything else related to the testing? Trickle down, standardized assessments. Here.
I don't know if it's up there, but with testing, what about the huge amounts of time for test prep?
Yes.
As a piece of that.
Which also goes into the curriculum, but yes, test prep.
The time.
We're looking at
As
time.
you're narrowing the curriculum, you're leaving out the art and music and physical education, focusing only on literacy and math.
Yes. All right. What are some other themes? I think I see something broad around technology.
Yes. Too much use of words.
Was that the consensus? Because I saw too much technology use. For you guys over here, did this use of media, was it more of a feeling it was being used inappropriately, that it was too much? What were your thoughts for this group?
They thought, actually, the two women wrote that up.
Okay.
And we had an interesting conversation about the fact that there's an overwhelming amount of technology.
Okay. So it's good. It's safe.
How do we take control of technology?
Okay.
Maybe need a mentor.
Okay. So it's safe to say too much technology.
Presence of too much and the wrong time.
Or unregulated uses.
Yeah.
Too much technology, unregulated uses. Which I think that's important to uses. Okay, I can't spell.
Too much time.
I think we talk about technology, and we have to acknowledge technology is not going anywhere, right? It drives our lives, but how do we make it meaningful and developmentally appropriate for young children when it's typically not, right?
Too little time on relationships, too much time on watching.
On technology and that sort of thing. Kind of. So also, it's like what's lost when what do you lose? So what's lost or sacrificed to technology? How can we get that back in? Because there are a lot of. I remember seeing my nephew. Like it was great seeing him do things on an iPad that I wouldn't expect a 4-year-old to do. But then it was sad that he couldn't go outside and play because he wanted to use the iPad. And so I felt really bad. Like I'm going to hide this thing from you. But so there were good things, but it was also bad. So how do we kind of deal with what's been lost or sacrificed to the technology? What's another theme that folks saw across these?
It looks like the schedules within school, we have 2 regimens, but we also have like a lack of free play and use of imagination. Because you're so scheduled in school, I know in elementary school we're very scheduled.
Yes, yes.
So
yeah, I do see what you're saying here. School, schedule, and then there was play here.
free play and use of imagination.
Yes, over here as well.
Yeah.
I think we got the standards. All right.
Is there a theme about education, perhaps? Like it says education of politicians, education in higher ed, and education of the children in quality care and education. I don't know, is that?
I do see that. I see one is about, and I think that's really important, and not just politicians, but even parents, on what development appropriate looks like. So there's that kind of broad education, and then there's also, I think, there's some issues around just higher ed access, right? Like as I mentioned to some folks, I no longer, I keep saying I'm a professor of early childhood, except we don't have an early childhood program. And in fact, in Washington, D.C., there is no college that has an undergraduate early childhood program anymore, because they just, they're not offering it to under. There's a few that have a master's degree program. But so where are you supposed to go if you want to be an early childhood teacher as an undergrad? Not through the traditional programs, insert Teach for America and all these other things, because no one's providing that kind of service. So I do see that as the higher ed piece. I think that's what people were looking for, whether they're not preparing people well for early childhood teachers, or if they even have the opportunity to kind of major in early childhood education and that sort of thing as well, too.
So there's
Yes.
also, I'm from Maryland.
Mhm.
I know that a lot of our teaching schools are like directly linked to Common Core standards, and so there's a relationship between higher ed institutions and Common Core, or the materials that are sold.
Oh yeah, I have to be careful when I blast it, because one of my colleagues, she's developing park tests. So I'm very careful on the radio going, well, I can't lose my job here, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because that's who's making, that's who's doing a lot of this stuff for our college and faculty who do assessment. They're psychometricians, that's what they do. And then they complain, she comes to us and says, but don't use it for VAM. I'm like, but that's what you're creating, and that's how it's going to be used, but yes, absolutely. I'm sorry, so I got lost in the discussion of to what's the next.
The next one was like scheduling, play.
Play, and okay.
Too much
Maybe time for play.
Not enough time for play.
Yeah. Time for play, and also kind of like importance.
Right. It's definitely related to number one.
Yes, you can see how they're connected, right? There's not enough time for play because of the academic push down, the test prep, and the too much technology, and so they're leading to that. Exactly.
And unifying all this is the diminishment of that.
Yes, and that was, someone mentioned that, right? Educating people about DAP, misinformation and mixed messages to parents can also be related to that, to the lack of understanding of what development appropriate practices are. There was something else.
It goes along with the advocate statement in terms of bringing those messages out, parents, to the public, to everybody.
So maybe one on advocating for DAP and what that is. Does that sound like
I think so.
Also, like respect of the profession.
Yes.
That's number 6, so it's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And pay.
Respect for the profession, which I think includes a lot of the things we saw about pay, about higher ed access, and about, definitely that kind of respect piece as well too. So again, I don't know where it plays into, but as, I'm really into the social emotional piece for a lot of the work I've been doing, and it probably can fit into the one here. I don't want to say that this is it, but we still have others. But if we start thinking now about these things here, so the next part is to think about what is being done. You guys come from a broad area, a lot of places, lots of things are being done in certain groups to do this. As we know, DEY worked about looking at this curriculum issue with the different pieces they had published. Their workshop this week also looked at that as well. We know other groups, I think some of Diane's group is looking at technology. So first we want to hear what are people doing around these issues, and then what else can we be doing and what needs to be done. On certain levels, when you advocate for DAP, who are you advocating to? I think a lot of it is parents, right? Parents have unrealistic expectations of what their 4- and 5-year-olds should be able to do. And whether that comes from the school or society, there's a part of that, but how do we do that to them? How do we get this information to parents? I had a father call me. So in DC, if you don't live in the district, your kids are considered out of boundary, and they can come to the school, but if they get in any type of trouble, behavior, or anything, then the school has the right to not let them come back because they're out of boundary. So he calls me up to tell me that he's been told 4-year-old that his son writes too big. And he needs to get his writing down to a normal level or they're going to put him out of the school. What? And he wanted to know if I knew of any programs as an early childhood professor at Howard University that could help his 4-year-old son write smaller. And after I put him on hold so I could scream for like 30 seconds, like, what? And then, you know, to the resources, well, writing big is normal, especially for 4-year-old boys, right? This is not a problem. And I said, if you take him to the doctor and the doctor said he actually has a physical problem with his hands, that's one thing. He's like, no, doc said he's fine. I said, then the school needs to calm down. Like his writing, I mean, but this is the pressure, you know? And his dad is calling everybody he can because he doesn't want his kid kicked out of the school, which is one of the nicer public schools in Washington, D.C. But this is the pressure because they think the writing is going to hurt their test scores down the line, and they just want to nip it in the bud as early as possible.
One of our biggest problems is we put them on hold while we scream.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, we need to stop doing that.
And scream right in front, just scream right in front of them. I mean, I did kind of, yeah, I did kind of like, no, I hear you. And I did let him know under no circumstances I thought what was doing was horrible, and if the school wanted to talk to me, but I really was like, hold on, what the? You know, I had to, I was like, this is not happening, this is real life. So that's a part of the big issue too. So again, what's being done as we think about that, because I think there are some good things being done. We want to recognize those things and see how we can support them. And then what else can we do in any of these areas to get the word out? Now, there's many different types of approaches. Some people are not comfortable outside with a protest sign screaming at your politician. That's one way to get things done. But there are other ways to do things done. Advocacy takes a lot of different routes, right? Writing letters to elected officials, meeting with people, town hall forums. There's a lot of different things. So I think the last part of the day is thinking about what can we do and how can DEY support whatever it is that we think we should do around any of these issues, or maybe some of these issues as well. But before we break into small groups again, what are some of the things that you know that are being done around some of these issues? Maybe in your state or your community as well, so we can hear about some of the other things. Because I think a lot of people think, oh, nothing's happening, nobody cares. We do care, we are active, and there's so much being done. So I'd like to hear and share some of that before we get into what else we can do.
Well, NAEYC senior staff told us last week that they are working with the Principals Association on educating principals about DAP and play, and they are preparing toolkits for teachers to talk with other teachers, with principals, with school boards, and so forth and so on. And that's progress.
That's a big start. And those of us like myself at universities, I keep reaching out to the people in my higher ed department. It's like, whatever you want me to come in and do that child development for principals. Yes, child development for principals, because they don't have that kind of training and background. And so how do we advocate for that and to get them to do that so that they understand, because they're going in there with this mindset that doesn't really appeal to young children on how to deal with their issues as well.
Not only do they not have it, but a lot of our teachers don't have it in undergrad. Many of them didn't get child development degrees, they got a legal studies degree. And so we have people teaching K1 and 2 even that don't have a strong background in childhood.
Yeah.
And I think even changing the requirements for our teachers that are going to be working with early childhood kids, that they should have some background in early childhood. That's too hard to do also.
Yeah, and I broached this to the DCPS and said, have you guys thought about doing an endorsement, an early childhood requirement that we could offer here? No, we do it in-house, is what I keep being told, that districts provide their own training in-house if you don't have any training, right? And so we know what that leads and that sort of thing. But it doesn't mean we let them off the hook, right? To say, I think we have to find creative ways to kind of force them to, you know what, you're right. We need training for our teachers in early childhood or teaching kindergarten, first grade. Can you help us do that? And that's part of it is the push to do that, right? We have to give them that push a little bit. Some of that comes through public shaming, right? This is what's happening in your district, and then they're like, and some of that comes through other collaborative ways.
What do we do with all the teachers that are trained that want to leave the field because they see that they're having to do things that go against the training that they can't deal with, that they feel it's bad for children. So in some cases it's better not to do training. You don't have to know them.
That is true. Yeah.
Sorry, but training.
So the new teachers, depending on where you're coming from, what kind of training you're getting. Absolutely.
One of the things I think we need to do is to quote from the National Association of Elementary School Principals. They published a document more than 25 years ago, Early Childhood Education and the Elementary School Principal. And they dealt with class sizes, they dealt with curriculum, they dealt with parent involvement, it was all in there. And I know at times when I have spoken at the Chicago Board of Education budget hearings, I have quoted that to them, saying to them that you really need to get your principals looking at that document and really doing what's in there.
Yeah. And showing them that, because a lot of the times I think you know, we call them out, the reformed, on the lack of research. But I think we also have to turn to our research, like you said, turn to the stuff that we have and say, no, this was done, this was looked at, this was studied, this is the results, we know where we're getting this from, as a kind of counter to this thing where they think, well, this is what should be done, but actually looking at some of the research that's done as well, so kind of highlighting that stuff as well.
Along with that is actually speaking at Board of Education budget hearings. It is very, very effective.
Great, good, I'm glad to hear that's working. Yes.
There's a grassroots organization in Chicago that has taken quite a hold, and I think that they've become influential in their research and speaking out. It's called Raise Your Hand.
Okay. I'm going to add that to our resource list. And can you tell us a little bit about what they do?
They research various things going on in the school, so they would be touching on budget. They go through the documents and they create information and reports and disseminate it. They have become considered sufficiently reliable now that when there are controversies going on in our school system, the press actually is seeking them out. So I think that that's a
and that's what we want, right? We want to be the people they come to in the field and say, what do you think?
They have been dealing with some issues with special education, some issues with preschool.
Right.
It's a group that is truly citywide. Mm-hmm. They're active, engaged members from every part of this large community I live in.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah.
So it's not necessarily directly related to early childhood, but I think it has a huge impact, and it's a hugely positive thing that's happening right now, which is the testing, refusal, and opt-out movements. Because what that has done is it has called into question the validity of the entire project and opened up of corporate education reform and opened up a space, I think, to have a conversation about what kind of schools do we want. What do we want for our schools instead, and early childhood needs to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it gets pushed aside because people think test refusal starts in the 3rd grade. But as we know, there are tons of tests in the 1st and 2nd grade. Yeah. You can be refusing too. And pre-K, right? And these pre-K assessments. And it's not just parents opting out. That's been a big part of it. But another part of the testing movement, there's been a group starting, Teachers of Professional Conscience, where teachers are refusing to administer the test, those who are not in a right-to-work state and have a little union protection. I understand that not all teachers can do this, but they have also been saying that they will not administer the test. And so it doesn't get the test done away, except it did in Florida. There was a kindergarten teacher in Gainesville, Florida, who wrote a letter to her parents and published it. I'm not giving this test, this is horrible. And they actually got the district did away with it for kindergarten students. So when you go to the parents, that's a possibility. And so don't think of opting out as just something parents, students, and teachers, and even administrators. We've gotten some few administrators that have just said, you know what, we're not even going to give the test. So, and that's what we're hoping for along the line. So United Opt Out is one of the sites you can go to learn more about opting out and test refusal as well.
In fact, the teachers organized in Somerville, Massachusetts, also around teaching strategies gold. They didn't want to use that. They had a system of assessment that they really felt strongly about. And the MTA, the Massachusetts Teachers Association, backed them and helped them, and they fought back, and they don't have to use the TS Gold system. They can use what they had been using in kindergarten.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, and then in addition to opt-out in the same category would be more than a score.
Yes, more than a score group. Jesse Hagopian, I would say his name wrong, and his folks as well. They were in Seattle pushing huge opt-out numbers. For those of you on the East Coast, the opt-out conference will be in Philadelphia in February, where we bring together, we kind of move to go to areas to kind of help people in the area who are growing in their opt-out numbers as well. Well, these are good. These are definitely some good starts, and I'm sure there's more than others, but I'd like to spend our last 15 minutes thinking about what comes next. So looking at some of these issues, what can we do around these issues, and what can DEY help you to do around these issues? Because I think there's always a lot more that we can do. Granted that we're already doing a lot too, so we always have to remember that. I think we're all here, we're doing a lot. Maybe there's a way to get the word out. Maybe there's something that's just out there around play, but you're not able to really get it out enough or get it circulated to the right people, and that's the way we can start and help. I worked with another group where we looked at this, and one of the things, because we wanted to do about it was working with parents, rethinking their expectations of children. So starting like a social awareness campaign around developmentally appropriate practice. And maybe that's the wrong term because that doesn't speak to lay people. You know, what is DAP? Like, it doesn't make any sense. My students, when I was teaching at Indiana, thought it was funny to make t-shirts that said, "We are not DAP" for their graduation. And no one got it, of course, because it doesn't make sense to anyone else. So maybe that's why we need to rethink how we use these terms when we talk to parents and other people, but kind of fight back against these really high expectations. So if we can spend some time in our group really thinking about that, and then maybe come together at the end. I know we're going to go over time a little bit.
We can go a little over. Is that okay with people?
I think we have the room till 8. Are we okay till then? Or?
We may not go till 8, but if we go past 7:30, is that okay?
Yeah, we'll try and wrap up as soon as possible, but we can come back into our groups to really think about that. And we'll come around as well to kind of hear what you guys have to say and then take back what are some things that we can all do around these issues. Sorry, I think it's probably